Welcome everybody to the panel session on youth mobilization to declare COVID-19 vaccines a global common good. My name is Lukas Posegga. I'm a creative community builder at the Grameen Creative Lab, and it's a big honor to be part of the Social Business Youth Summit, which is superly hosted by our brothers and sisters at YY Goshti. And as much as we would have loved to be there with you in person today, we all know why this is not possible as of now. The coronavirus has changed the life of our planet dramatically. Our image of normality, public life, and social togetherness has been put to test like never before. Millions of people have lost their jobs, children who cannot go to school, theaters and cinemas are closed. And what's probably the hardest is we are all missing the personal encounters with one another that used to be so natural to us. Today, the virus has infected over 113 million people worldwide and has claimed the lives of over 2.5 million. In the process, it has exacerbated the effects of poverty and hunger, economic and social inequalities that have been wrecking us globally even before the pandemic. Since the Second World War, we have not seen a challenge that depends so much on our collective solidarity. Recognizing this, Professor Muhammad Yunus, backed by 24 other Nobel laureates and over 100 moral leaders, launched a campaign during the last summer of purpose to declare COVID-19 vaccines a global common good, so that pharma monopolies and patents don't get in the way of saving people's life everywhere. They appealed to governments and business leaders, and I quote, "We call on you to urgently ensure access to life-saving COVID-19 vaccines, treatments and equipment for everyone in the world. Patents should be lifted, technological knowledge shared freely and openly, and no profiteering allowed during this pandemic. Governments, scientists, and pharmaceutical companies must cooperate and combine resources to ensure no one is left behind. This is a crisis where nobody is safe until we are all safe." A petition on avas.org has accumulated almost 1 million signatures from civilians all over the world. And a number of response programs have also been launched already, the biggest one being the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerators, or the ACT Accelerator. It was launched by the WHO and its partners, and having collected donations worth $6.2 billion today, as a figure from WHO, the vaccines pillar of the ACT Accelerator, COVAX, has made headlines just last week for deploying the first 600,000 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine in Ghana. So, sounds not too bad, doesn't it? While we are deeply thankful to the scientists who developed the vaccines, the problem is that COVAX is using the donated public money to fund oligopolistic vaccine producers who are putting up barriers to restrict production and drive up prices, leaving us all in danger. That is why we stand in line with the likes of Nobel laureate Professor Yunus, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and almost 1 million citizens demanding COVID-19 vaccines to be declared as a global common good. A people's vaccine, not a profit vaccine. Now, under this premise, it is my honor to open this panel to my highly respected guests. And before we get into an open creative exchange, I will invite you now one by one to introduce yourselves for around 5 minutes, sharing your personal background and how you experienced the pandemic. And I would like to begin with my friend Marvin. Marvin Jeromin is a founding member of the Vivo 2020 Young Medics, a group of young medical students who look at systematic health problems from a humanistic perspective. And Marvin will shed some light on the vaccines we are debating from a medical perspective, explain how different kinds of vaccines work, and aim to create a well-founded basis of facts on argumentational basis to the vaccines that we are discussing today. And besides knowledge on vaccines. Marvin has a good knowledge in PCR testing strategies and can share why this plays an integral role in a successful global vaccination program. Marvin, please tell us a bit about yourself and how you evaluate the situation.
Okay, hello. Thank you to having me here. Thank you, Lukas, for the introduction. I will share my screen so you can see some pictures. Let's see if it works. So, okay, let's go. I will first introduce myself. I'm Marvin from Germany, and I'm a medical student at the Julius Maximilian University in Würzburg, Bavaria. And today I'm going to talk about the different types of vaccines. So let's start with the most common COVID vaccines from the different companies. Most of the vaccines approved so far have one thing in common. They are gene-based, and gene-based vaccines are divided into mRNA vaccines, such as those from BioNTech or Moderna, or vector-based ones like the Russian Sputnik or the one from the Oxford University called AstraZeneca. And there are also vaccines from India and China that are not gene-based, but inactivated pathogens. I will talk about this also. So let's talk about how they work. Gene-based vaccines are very important for pandemic control, in my opinion, because they are cheap and easy to produce and reproduce. And the two major representatives of this group are the mRNA-based vaccine and the vector vaccines. And both types contain blueprints of certain parts of the coronavirus. So these blueprints enter our body cells where they are being read, and then our body can build parts of the virus on its own. The body then learns to deal with the virus, and it recognizes the virus parts and learns how to build antibodies. And this strategy is meant when we talk about the immune response. So how exactly does an mRNA-based vaccine work? mRNA is part of our genetic material that leaves the cell nucleus, and it is then converted into proteins within the cytoplasm. And these proteins remain in the cell. And there's also no way for the mRNA to get back into the nucleus. So we strongly believe as scientists that the system is very safe for us human beings. But what about the vector vaccines? In this case, the vector vaccine is a modified virus of a different virus type, which acts as a carrier for the blueprint. So, for example, AstraZeneca uses harmless code viruses, so-called adenoviruses, to carry the blueprint of parts of the coronavirus. And these vector viruses cannot harm the body, but they have the ability to bring the blueprint into our cells. So this method is very similar to the mRNA-based method I talked before. But after delivering the blueprint in the cell itself also begins to produce the coronavirus. So both blueprints, the one of the mRNA and the vector method, picture the same viral protein. It's the so-called spike protein. I think you've heard of it before. So the spike protein is found on the shell or capsid of coronaviruses and enables the living virus to enter the human cell. But in isolation, the spike protein is harmless. And for the virus, the spike protein is essential. So we think that it will not mutate anytime soon. And this is very important if we speak about vaccines and the ability to work for coronavirus mutations. So this means that these vaccines also protect against coming mutations of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And since the triggered immune response is also directed against the spike protein of other coronaviruses, it is hoped that the vaccine will also be effective against all other coronaviruses, such as the ones which cause Middle East respiratory syndrome, called MERS, or other coronavirus-driven diseases like SARS or something else. So apart from the very promising gene-based technologies, there is another very important vaccine I will talk about, and it's the Indian vaccine called Covaxin. This vaccine is based on different technology. Covaxin uses a living coronavirus, which is genetically manipulated to produce harmless and inactivated viruses, but it retains many of the characteristics the wild coronavirus has. So this inactivated virus is then injected into your human body, and the body recognizes the danger even if the virus is dead, and then also reacts by producing an immune response. This type of vaccine is widely used now at the current day and is found in many other vaccines for a lot of other diseases. For example, polio, I think you heard of it, was successfully contained in this way. So maybe you heard of it, African is almost polio-free. So this vaccine is very promising also. So I've talked about the different molecular mechanisms, and the next thing I will talk about is there are different types, why there are different types. And this is mainly because we have newer technologies that makes newer types of vaccines possible. The genetic ones seem to be the most promising in terms of immune response and production costs. But to develop this gene-based types, new technologies were needed, and these cost a lot of money. Some manufacturers of vaccines therefore continue to develop the conventional vaccines, which seem to have disadvantages in direct comparison, but are proven and can be produced without additional know-how. So for now, we already know that the vaccines we use have a great benefit with practically no severe side effects. This is important. And this is ensured by extensive approval procedures. So let me explain. I want to share the screen. So let me explain. To prove that they are virtually no risk is very expensive and requires a large number of people to observe over a very long period of time. And the pandemic situation we are now encountering has accelerated these processes immensely. But nevertheless, a vaccine can only be approved if the authorities think it's safe. And this procedure varies from country to country. And this decision cannot be made only on medical grounds. It also has to be balanced against the damage that could be done if the vaccine is not licensed or if there is a longer wait for it. So for this reason, it is very carefully considered if and when a vaccine is approved. So for now, it seems that the vaccines that have been licensed so far are far more effective than we expected. And moreover, there's no reason to believe that they do harm. Vaccines are therefore justified as the solution for the pandemic, and they will save millions of lives. So with that said, I hope it demonstrates to you that vaccinations are one of the greatest achievements of medicine, and it can successfully fight the ongoing pandemic. In addition to fair distribution, what we are talking about, the willingness of the population to get vaccinated is also crucial. And I hope that I was able to contribute a little with my small talk to our stimulating discussion about the successful distribution of COVID-19 vaccines. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Marvin. Super cool to have a very solid foundation of facts to stand up on and to base our discussion on. We have learned what are the different types of vaccines that they are. We have learned how they are working. And you have very righteously highlighted what are the main challenges in the global vaccination program, namely the production and distribution side, and of course also the willingness in the population to also get vaccinated. And to introduce our next panelist, who is working also as a professional in public health, Stephen, my friend in Kenya. Thank you for making the time to come here. Stephen is the CEO of Stolink, a youth-led organization whose primary ethos is to make information on non-communicable diseases available at all times and in relevant formats. So he's a real specialist on how to communicate on health issues. And he's also a steering member of the WHO as a strategic advisor in SDG 3.4. And yeah, Stephen, please introduce yourself a little bit and tell us how you have experienced the pandemic and in your perspective, how to create awareness effectively also in young people in raising health issues. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. And I'm very, very humbled to be on this platform. Indeed, this is a very important communication and important discussion that we are having that really we need to see more of such kind of discussions happening. So straight to my experience with COVID-19 and what we can be able to do as some of the action points to take us to the next steps. So as we are well aware, COVID-19 was attacked, the world in a very rampant way, and the people who are at most risk were people living with non-communicable diseases and the elderly. Statistics indicated clearly that from countries that had the highest number of COVID-19 deaths, these are countries that had an aging population, and most of these people either had diabetes, or they had cardiovascular diseases, or they had chronic lung diseases. They had a pre-existing condition that really exacerbated or really fastened the COVID-19 action on them, and that led to a lot of deaths, and suffering for these people and their families. And having worked in the public health space and in the non-communicable diseases space, when we saw COVID-19 and when we began seeing the data that was coming in terms of the deaths that were occurring, and in terms of the people who are affected by this, then immediately we became worried because first of all, few challenges existed, in our context in Africa and in the countries that we serve. One is that the health systems were not prepared, to be able to handle such a huge burden of disease. And looking back, then we already have other existing burdens of disease, and the health systems were not ready for COVID-19. And the other thing that we saw was that mobilization and how to communicate this knowledge. Despite the fact that we really tried to do that, that was also not very robust because of the existing challenges. And as a result, when we saw that COVID-19 is here and it is affecting populations in the millions, then we were already very worried. And one of the biggest worries that followed that is that our countries, especially in developing countries, we are slowly seeing an increased number of people living with non-communicable diseases. And we are seeing that the elderly and the old age, they have little or no access to immediate health services. And so it was upon our countries and, to work really hard to ensure that, first of all, the young people and the old people are separated, in that if you are in the city, you stay in the city, and the elderly who are in the villages, they stay in the villages, and that information is passed, and that hospitals are quickly prepared so that they are able to handle COVID-19 cases. And what this led to was that a lot of services that were considered not urgent in the health system closed off. So you would see that things like non-communicable diseases were taken as not being very serious. And so their regular checkups were closed off. And you'd see that the hospitals shifted all of their workforce and attention to take care of COVID-19 patients. And having this background and looking forward into now the scenario where we are beginning to see vaccines and we are beginning to see them working effectively, then this begs a very big question, especially for low and middle income countries, that when will the vaccines arrive? How will they arrive? Who gets them first? And what is the cost of doing this? And when you begin to analyze the statistics that exist, statistics indicate that COVID-19 vaccines, when they'll come to developing countries, they are almost 3 times the price that is being charged in developed countries, and that even their arrival will be very late, and that even when it arrives eventually, it will be given to a select group of people before it can be readily available for the general population. In fact, projections indicate that maybe it would take probably up to the end of 2023 if the developing countries were to get the COVID-19 vaccination. And when you look at those statistics, then this begins to worry us, working in this space, that how then will our people remain protected until 2023, as the projections indicate that they get the vaccine? And that really begs it really supports and really enhances the message by Mohammed, that it needs to be a global good. It needs to be available, and it needs not to be for profit, but for the people, and for the people that actually need it. We were reading the other day, and research is saying that developed countries have ordered a huge number of vaccines that can be able to take care of their populations 2 to 3 times over, when developing countries have not been able to have a chance to even access these vaccines in the first place. And as we move forward, what I see as one of the biggest challenges that we'll have as concerns, COVID-19, and especially the vaccine, is that this is perhaps going to be, if not handled well, the biggest inequality gap that is going to exist in the next few years, that will really define developing countries from developed countries. And this need not to be the case. Where we are in the world, we are moving towards a world where there is reduced inequalities. And that is why when we heard that Mohammed Yunus and other Nobel laureates are, championing that the governments and the producers of vaccines be able to really get these vaccines to the people, then this is a message that we have to rally behind. This is a message that we have to champion for on a very serious note, to ensure that these vaccines are available, and even as they become available to developing countries, to equip, governments, stakeholders, young people, old people, to equip them with necessary information, so that when the community has been prepared with the right information and programming to ensure, and that those who need them the most get them first, and then everybody else gets to get these vaccines. And so communication in itself will also become a very critical role. And here is where the young people can also be used as advocates and as ambassadors to really shine a light on COVID-19 vaccines, and really shine a light on who needs them and when they need them. And we really support, and we hope that this call to action will really get these vaccines, to developing countries as well in due time, before the loss is made, the loss that is coming from COVID-19. Otherwise, thank you very much, and back to you, Lucas.
Thanks a lot, Stephen. That was a really great insight into how you see things, especially from the perspective of the developing countries. And you have raised a number of issues that are highly relevant to this discussion, such as how to communicate effectively on the vaccination program, but also the issue of the long time that it might take for the vaccines to arrive in developing countries, how to bridge the time towards that, to keep still as much people safe as possible, while at the same time trying, of course, to minimize the time that we have to wait. As we are all aware, we are seeing now first mutations of the virus in South Africa and in the UK. And the longer time we allow to pass with not everybody vaccinated, the higher the risk of a mutation, and who knows whether the next one will still be covered by the vaccines we have today. So I think this is a strong argument why we need to really maximize the global production speed of vaccines, and do what is necessary to do that. You also picking up on the fact that a lot of people are missing information or have a hard time accessing it, especially in rural areas, is a matter where also technology plays a huge role, and we will have a look at that as well. For now, I would like to ask Swarnima in India, who has been on one side established with TheaCare, a social business that makes knowledge on women's health and maternal health available to many. And she offers webinars and ebooks and campaigns. And additionally, she's also the curator of the FemmeCon, which is one of the leading conventions to bring people together to discuss about the topics of female health. And Swarnima, during the pandemic, besides all the great work you are doing for women that you're already doing, you were also part in the national COVID response programs of COVID. And you were also tackling a number of issues that were brought up by Stephen. Please share us a bit of how you experienced it and what you saw as the crucial factors in a successful response program.
Thank you so much, Lucas. It's such a pleasure, to be here, and I'm learning so much already from others who've been on the ground. So thank you so much for having me. So since we're talking about mobilization, the idea of mobilization for COVID vaccines, there are a couple of things that I would like to sort of a lot has already been said. So I will just talk a little bit about some non-medical factors that come into the picture. I think one of the biggest things that we as a country in the global south saw during the pandemic were problems that were that has been defined by the World Economic Forum as converging crises. So these are not crises that are related to COVID. It's not about public health. It's not about infrastructure, but it's about things like domestic violence. Things that increased during that time. We saw things like migrant labor issues that grew up at that time. So everything that is related to the cycle of the economy, and when the cycle of the economy paused, then all these inequalities sort of came to the forefront. And right before COVID, there was a very volatile moment that we as a country were facing at that point of time. And there was a communal tension, sort of an atmosphere that was going on. And what has happened was, and which is also feeding into the entire discussion around the COVID vaccine, is the question of privilege and access, majoritarianism within a country, etc. So when we talk about vaccine nationalism and vaccine diplomacy, we are of course looking at it from a global perspective. The data that is there currently shows that nearly half of the 10 billion doses have actually been pre-ordered by the 27 countries in the European Union, along with five more of the richest countries. Whereas as Stephen said, that the poorer countries are dependent on the COVAX machinery, which has its own problems. But if we look at the micro systems in every country, we will see that the politics of the vaccine are very local and context specific as well. For instance, in India, that was something very interesting happened when so we are the country of yoga and Ayurveda and like a lot of indigenous medicine, and it's all very evidence based in its own way. But the moment COVID happened, you would see a lot of people, like thousands of people, tens of thousands of people believing in miracle cures by some herb, some medicinal herb, or something like that. There have actually been medicines launched and banned in the market, a number of them in the last I don't know, like 7 months. That has already like happened in India. That okay, this is a they've launched Ayurvedic medicines and said, what, this is a sure shot medicine for COVID. People don't know about it. It's only the Indian ancient wisdom that will know about it, and they have been promptly banned by the government. So we've already gone even before the vaccine sort of Pfizer and Moderna and everybody came up. Medicines were launched and banned already from the Indian government, because of course they were like questionable. So when we come to a country like India, when we come to other such countries in the global south as well, and when we talk about the issue of vaccination access, it is hard to delineate it from the idea of distrust of Western medicine or distrust of Western interests in that space. There is a distrust that the rich countries have the medicine, we have our wisdom, and things like that. So the distrust of Western medicine is what we are seeing one of the biggest barriers to vaccine adoption. That if you take some herbs, if you take some concoctions, you'll get immunity boosting drinks and things like that. And you already see these kind of disturbing content on Instagram influencers. And then if some, learned, medicinal sort of, people with a medicinal background tell you the same thing, a lot of people fall for it. And in countries such as India and various other countries in the global south, where access to science, education, and the correct information is extremely difficult, people do fall for it. So it has been an additional challenge, like that. Similarly, there is a suspicion or a distrust of big pharma. That is also something that is really playing into, adding as a becoming a huge barrier. That the suspicion of big pharma, that it's all about money and it's all about blah blah blah, and therefore how is it that we have a vaccine in less than a year when so all this distrust is, so when we are talking about vaccine mobilization, we cannot look at it as just an issue of vaccination. A lot of allied and converging issues have to be addressed, which is, science versus religion versus mythology versus emotion or whatever you call it. And also, the idea that, somehow whenever it comes to medication, whenever it comes to, for instance, India even had the polio, this is not the first public health crisis that a country like India is facing. We've had leprosy, polio, all of that. And a lot of the history, and we've done very well with polio. Now, what we're seeing is that when we are talking about public messaging, when we are encouraging people to go for vaccination or go for science, a lot of the historical messaging is missing. And that is not probably the right thing to do, because we have done well in our public health infrastructure in the past with polio and all of that. And I feel that, if the past successes of vaccination, of science, of global collaboration, and all of that, if that is highlighted, that will really boost, people's trust in the infrastructure. So that is one thing. Now, that is not to say, while I say that there is all this, distrust and everything that is there, I must also say that, India has also leveraged its manufacturing capacities. And, India is, it's one of the largest manufacturers of vaccine. We've got the Serum Institute, in India, in Pune, and we've already pre-ordered, 2 billion doses and things like that. But in South Asia, there is a lot of distrust. Okay, this thing is coming from India. Like, can we really trust it? And there is another one, lobby of people in India itself who are like, but it was produced in India, like, is it safe? So there are a lot of people and a lot of fears that are happening. So in terms of solutions, number one is that in countries like the global south, where, religion plays a role, social structures like religion, caste, class, tribes, all these things play a role. I think this is a good time to tap into it. We generally are always talking about equalizing things and all of that, but now might be the time to really tap on the religious leaders, to really tap on community leaders and people who are trusted by communities and deprived communities, underserved communities, so that they become the spokespersons of the government and of science. So that needs to be done. That is number one. Number two, like I said, every country has a history of good public health messaging. We have to dive into that and include that in the current messaging. It is not something COVID has been a huge equalizer for us globally, because, like you were saying the other day that this is a situation where no one is safe until everyone is safe. That's absolutely true. But when we are coming to implementation, we have to go local. We have to go context specific. Then, like a person who is struggling to get a 2-square meal will not care about who is not safe in like the other side of the world. Like, frankly speaking, they will care about, the child who's already starving or malnourished, or, people who are already not able to afford medication. How do you then get a doctor or a community leader to reach out to these people who are already feeling cheated on a daily basis? They're cheated out of resources. How do you get through these people? So integrating that message, that is number two. Number three is really, having a sort of, real-time response. For instance, a lot of conversation is happening all around the world these days about, the regulations of, Facebook and social media and Twitter, like all the, social media giants, the conversation around regulation has in a way started. It started with the US, it's happening in India, a huge thing happened in Australia. Now is the time to collaborate with them. Now is the time to collaborate with people who have the reach, to say that, see, these are the verified sort of, sources, these are the verified things. This happened during the American elections when Facebook, did all that stuff that, okay, this is not verified and this is verified, blah, blah, blah. Now is the time to dip into those relationships and collaborate, so that if people are, spreading falsehoods, then the social media organizations have to put some kind of a sticker of some kind, that, okay, this is unverified, in local languages. That is the third thing. So collaborating with channels that already exist instead of antagonizing them right now. I don't think that that will serve us a lot of purposes, So responding in real time, the moment there is, dubious stuff, unscientific stuff, put a warning over there. Then, the ministries have to also increase their capacity and respond to that. That, this is something that's going viral, this is not true, this is what the government data says, blah, 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 blah. So things like that, real-time response. And the third is really looking and redefining what it means to have frontline health workers. In every country, the definition of frontline health workers is very different. In India, there is a system called the ASHA workers, who are the accredited workers who are like, they're women. They go to rural countries and they talk about, maternal health and all kinds of things. These are the people who are already trusted in the community. These are the people who are already giving information. They have delivered children, they have cured illnesses. Trust them. Give them brochures, give them like pictorial, stuff that they can go and use a storytelling that gives the facts. So redefining and empowering the frontline healthcare workers. I think these are four, broadly speaking, of course, we can, as the sort of conversation goes, we'll dive deeper into each of these. But in terms of strategy, these four things, going as local and context specific, aligning your vaccination strategy with the socio-cultural realities of the country, not calling it just something universal, but also something which is deeply intertwined with the way people are thinking in that particular country. That aligned messaging is extremely important. Otherwise, it's too big picture. For the average man out there, unfortunately, the big picture makes less of a sense. The reality in front of them makes more sense. And right now, our priority is to get them safe and to get the correct information out there. So yeah, I think I'd start with that and would love to hear from the others.
Thank you so much, Swarnima. What a fantastic diversified perspective on a number of things. We've heard now some highly important issues that are tackling both the issue of how to make sure that information reaches disadvantaged people, but also how to make sure it's the right information, science versus myth. And what role can social leaders, moral leaders, religious leaders play in that process as we look back on the appeal that we are basing our discussion on, which is backed by over 100 moral leaders. So there is a pool of people who are supporting it. Let us as young people now also see and define how to craft these messages in the best way so that they can have an impact coming from the trusted leaders. You also brought up the issue of how to reach the poorest of the poor and how actually this crisis is affecting them even worse than, people are saying this virus makes no difference between rich and poor. It can get to everybody. In principle, true, but in reality, it has hit those who have been disadvantaged even much worse than the rest of the world. And kind of looking into this perspective, I would like to introduce my good friend Ahmad Mobaiyed onto the stage. Ahmad and I have been friends since the Young Challengers meeting in 2018, and it's a big honor to now welcome you onto our panel. Ahmed is the co-founder of the Syrian Youth Assembly and has built a network of over 100,000 young Syrians who they are providing digital education for. Ahmed has represented his people at the 2017 United Nations Geneva Peace Conventions. And Ahmed, good morning. Good to have you with us. How do you see this pandemic has, what effect it had on those people who are currently had to flee their home because of either armed conflict or political persecution? What's the situation in refugee camps around the world, in Lebanon and Turkey? How was the effects of the pandemic? What do you see?
Yeah, good morning first. Happy to be here. Good, always good to see you, Lucas. Actually, the news, as usually, are not that good when it comes to refugees camps, even in Europe. I think, to be honest, one of the worst camps ever for refugees is in Europe, in Greece, Moria camp. It's just very ironic. Today, when I woke up, I was checking social media, and I just read that a woman who set herself on fire, she's pregnant, because she cannot live there anymore. They charge her with arson and damaging properties. So the situations actually are pretty bad. You're usually talking about people who are already traumatized, left war, seen people die, seen family members dying. And basically, these people, I think, in my opinion, they need like the immediate attention, especially when you're talking about camps where they're isolated, they have no access to healthcare. Like in Moria camp, every 200 people have one bathroom. For each 1,300 people, you would have only one water point. So you're talking about no hygiene, no healthcare, no basics. And this is in Europe again. This is not like in Lebanon or in Turkey. But in other places, in Lebanon, I think also they suffered a lot recently because of the cold wave, and it came with the pandemic, and there's been some really harsh pictures of people carrying their dead kids because of the cold, because of a lot of things. Honestly, I don't know if there are any movements or if anything that happening to support these people. As you know, we try always to help refugees via digital solutions, but apparently a vaccine is not a digital thing that we could do. So we definitely support the movement that the social business Professor Yunus is doing in that manner. And yeah, I mean, the situation for refugees, I could tell, is pretty bad. They need an immediate attention. I mean, you also know we started working on a project for mental health, and this is also now increasingly important, not only the vaccine, but yeah, probably the vaccine would be more urgent. So how I see it, not very bright, but hopefully we could do something about it.
Thank you, Ahmad, for sharing. You know, it always touches me so deeply to hear on those most tragic stories that we have really in Europe on our in our front door, but also we have to be aware these situations are happening all over the place. And I respect you so much for your strength to be able to talk about it. And so thank you a lot for sharing. And yes, you have raised the issue of, you know, on one side, obviously the horrible situations of, you know, access to basic hygiene or let alone healthcare services. And also the aspect of what Swarnima raised, of the converging crises, that also mental health is becoming a huge issue in terms of dealing with this whole situation. And I think that speaks for pretty much everybody right now who has been deprived of social connections and, you know, all what we are missing from our daily life. But of course, for talking people about who are lived through a trauma, like you described, is it's such a high, urgently topic that certainly needs to get attention. And of course, the digital connectivity your organization has built in this network of young Syrians, which is a remarkable effort. This can, I believe, also be leveraged to delivering this sort of information on, you know, how to stay safe, how to detect science versus myth, all the things we are talking about. I think also the obviously, besides the main goal of getting everybody vaccinated as soon as possible, to bridge that time by providing effective communication that will help deal with it in a better way, and mitigating damage that it does will be a crucial factor, and technology will play a huge role. And so the aspect of technology, let's dive into it a little more. So introducing our next panelist, Akil. Akil, you are an activist for human rights, a true champion for European values. I saw your photos traveling across the continent with your face painted blue and the European stars. Super cool to have you here. Akil is advisory council member of the Global Shapers community, and he's really a true master in how to leveraging social media, and you know, how to really create a big wave on the digital way, and you know, how to orchestrating real effective campaigns. And so what you see are the opportunities that modern technology and connectivity are bringing us to handling the situation of misinformation, what's already being done, where can we improve? What's your perspective?
Thank you, Lukas, and big heart from my side, from Germany. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your passionate interest, Stephen, Swarnima, Marvin, Ahmad. I couldn't agree more with all of you, and I would love to change kind of the direction a little bit towards social media and the opportunity. Swarnima already talked about kind of collaboration, and I think that is something where I see a lot of potential, and I want to give you like 3 examples from what actually happened in the pandemic that we can learn from if we build further campaigns as global youth. And I agree with Stephen completely when we talk about kind of where there's a big failure of global governance, where we have 27 European countries and 5 rich countries that are buying vaccines more than 3-4 times than what they need, and at the same time we have a lack and shortage of vaccines where it's actually needed. So there's a big opportunity for that, and we as youth, I think, can unite and push towards that. So I really support kind of what this campaign that is led by Mohammed Yunus really pushes us all to go for and think about. Let's start with 3 things that happened during the pandemic. Very early in the beginning, we saw a TikTok video from Vietnam going global. That was the hand washing video, like a smooth way of how to wash your hands. That shows like what impact it can have, and that is kind of my first point, is if you have the right channel. That was a channel that actually was not that popular before the pandemic. It emerged kind of in the pandemic, and a lot of young people were using it, and they used kind of I think it was a combination of a singer, Kan Han, and Kwandang dancer. They mixed something together, made something that is super culturally relevant in Vietnam, but it spoke to really the youth across the globe. And what happened was, I looked at the numbers. The video itself got like maybe 700,000 views, but actually what happened after that was the hand washing challenge was started. We all know that there are challenges that don't make sense and don't have an impact, but at the same time there are challenges that actually have a big impact. And I would say such a challenge has a huge impact, because suddenly millions, maybe even billions of people in the world were like washing their hands, mimicking a video or making a new song or singing happy birthday 2 times while washing their hands. And it was something very simple, something that Swarnima talked about, like you need to be locally relevant. It needs to be in front of your eyes, in front of, okay, maybe even if I don't believe completely the science, but yeah, I can wash my hands while like singing this or dancing like this. So it works. There's a huge potential, and one way to tap into this is to use the right channels, to use the channels where people are on and people are using every single day. I think that is very important. The second one that I want to mention is around momentum and consistency. Lukas, you mentioned we have more than 100 moral leaders that support the pledge. We have several states of governments and former Nobel Peace laureates, with many people supporting it. But the question is, how consistent are they supporting it? Did they once sign it, or are they pushing for it every single day? And a good example from that can be seen in the youth. If we follow Greta Thunberg and all her equals in every single country, there are many people like Greta Thunberg in many individual countries that go on strike. I think now they're almost like 150 weeks on strike, and they haven't changed that during the pandemic. They went on strike every single week, always with the same claim, always supporting science. Also, what Swarnima said, I think to be a spokesperson of science is very important, but to do it with consistency and do it like really like keep pushing every single week. And I think that's very, very important. And we can see that with Fridays for Future, that they are still like we went through a major, we're still majorly in a crisis around the world. And we're still, the second topic that we often talk about is the climate reality and climate catastrophe. And that is mostly due to young people that we're actually talking about it. It's actually sad that it needs us, the young people, to step up. But sadly, if no one else does, we have to. So we can see that when we do this consistently, then it works. And I think social media is a good way of doing that. You can use tools on social media like Buffer or Hootsuite to even schedule things, persistently on Twitter, for example, to spread the message. And you can coordinate. Just recently, there was a huge Twitter storm against kind of the international trade organizations and individual countries to make really this effort a truly collaborative one, and to reduce all the barriers that exist to share this knowledge. And I think to plan that and to keep the momentum, you have to do it consistently. And we as young people can be the driver of that, to keep up, to bring the topic every single local election, every single national election. Every time they speak in any audience, they should hear it. And that is very important. And last but not least, I want to talk, the third part is the collaboration, but collaboration also with influencers. And influencers are not always only people that are like super famous, but can be famous in their local context. And I want to give you an example from East Africa. Bobby Wine is a very famous person in Uganda. And also a politician, and he started during the pandemic a song to educate his followers, but actually the national public in Uganda, on the coronavirus. He created a song called Coronavirus Alert, and it reached even to me in Germany, and I was grooving along the tunes because it's so catchy and so nice. But actually what he does is he's spreading a message to be alert of the coronavirus and what you should do about it. And that spread, especially in East African, West African cultures where I've worked and been, I've seen that often the audio is transported way further, but that's also a part of digital infrastructure that we have. So for example, using radio stations to spread a message. And this example showed it perfectly, that alone on YouTube, it was watched more than 1.5 million times, that video, but it was probably played more than a couple of million times on radio stations in every single tuk-tuk, rickshaw, where they were driving by, they can hear the message. So I think those are the three things that I wanted to share as a beginning. Choose the right channels, keep up the momentum to be consistent, and use local influencers and partnerships to really spread the message, maybe in unconventional ways that we haven't thought about before.
Thank you so much, Akil, for sharing this this beautiful insights. and really clear to the point. And also, yeah, I was also talking with Stephen a couple of days ago on this topic of, you know, how do you actually, like, of course, everyone knows it's important to educate people and give right information, but how do you make it so that it's engaging, that people actually listen? And I think these creative ways that you are sharing, you know, singing a song or making a challenge on video, this is a fantastic way to make it also joyful, to care about the pandemic, which I think is such an important driver. And now, before opening kind of more the free flow of a discussion, what tangible things we can do, I would like to introduce our last but certainly not least panelist, my friend Nino. Nino is a social entrepreneur and a digital development consultant. She's been working at the intersection of tech and socioeconomic development for the last 10 years, together with high-level partners ranging from Google to the United Nations. She's been passionate about grassroots initiatives and has worked with thousands of youth and women in her home country of Georgia. And besides from her excellent ability to strategize, which I really appreciate, she brings both energy and clarity to almost any discussion we've had. She's been working as a strategic contributor for us at Grameen Creative Lab every now and then. So super cool, Nino, to have you with us. And please share with us what's your perspective on what we heard so far, and particularly on the issue of digital accessibility and gender inclusion in the process.
Thank you, Lukas, for the introduction, and it's always a pleasure to be part of the YY initiatives, and I'm so glad that we are here and talking. Yes, keep it YY. Yeah, it's funny that we're talking about digital accessibility, and I'm running around my home to find a good connection to stay connected to the call. So I couldn't agree more with all the panelists that spoke before me, and I think generally speaking, you rightfully said that some people consider this a pandemic to be equal in terms of affecting everyone, but we do know that you know, maybe everyone has the same risk of getting the virus, but not everyone has the same access to healthcare, to attention, of treatment. And most importantly, not everyone has the luxury of staying at home. Not everyone has the luxury of being out of work or actually retaining the work by the economies staying closed. So I think it's important for us to understand that when we talk about vaccines, when we talk about reaction towards the virus, we're not just talking about people's fear of you know, their mental or, you know, physical health being affected, but what we're talking about is people's fear of their jobs being lost, and we're seeing how livelihoods are being worsened. So every day that without a vaccine is every day without the opportunity for economic prosperity. So I think this is what we should understand, and we should realize when we talk about accessibility of vaccine, that those countries who are not getting the vaccine are going to be in much worse situation, turning their, you know, way around the pandemic than those who are already vaccinated, and those who are actually quite ahead. So, you know, even in Georgia, we haven't yet received a single dose of vaccine, and this is affecting the way that the businesses have to be closed, and small and medium-sized enterprises, many of them have gone out of the business because they simply cannot stay closed for a year. And this, of course, then affects the employees that they have to retain. And this goes into this chain of general worsening of social and economic situation. So I couldn't agree more that having vaccine as a common good is so important. And I think, as you said, Lukas, there are some movements of this matter of donating vaccines, but we need to speak more about this. And what I wanted to mention, because we are talking about youth mobilization, I think what is important for us to understand here, an important thing that we need to understand every time we talk about youth, I think, is for us to understand that the power of use is really something unique, and we have seen this in so many different examples, and history has shown the power of use is really transformative, and it's all about the energy of young people. It's also about the volume and quantity of young people across the globe, right, as a growing generation. But what we need to understand is we shouldn't just mobilize young people, but we should engage them in our dialogue. And I think this is very important, because in history we have seen how power of youth has been used as just a way of getting large volumes of some things, as a way of just an instrument. So what I wish for this process, I think what we need to work on, and Akil mentioned really good examples, and Swarnima also mentioned some of the examples how we can engage. I think it's important for us to not just tell young people, hi, join this petition, and talk about how this is a common good, but actually involve them in discussion of how we can actually make the COVID vaccine a global common good. So how can this petition work? Maybe there are some arguments, maybe people are not really on the same page. So how do we discuss all the bottlenecks of this initiative? So I think this is so important for us to not mobilize young people, but engage young people, because once they are engaged, they will feel the ownership and they will feel the urge to actually mobilize themselves around it. So I think, what could help is for us to, using the different channels that was discussed, try to discuss the matters of this and say, how can this actually happen? And how can this happen on the local scale, with the local initiatives, with the local contexts? Because I think sometimes what we're facing is, everyone, generally, everyone wants a better world and everyone wants to change the world. But what we're often missing is how can this happen? So we all agree on what's, but how is always the problem. So I think in the same light, we should talk about, COVID vaccine being a global common good, which is what. But then we should talk about how can this work out. So if it was patent free, if it was done by all the other players in the world, how will it be implemented? What are the risks that are associated with this process? What are the benefits of it? How do we make sure that there are no bigger power dynamics that arise from this solution? So I think we should discuss this more. And in terms of your question regarding digital accessibility, I think this is also an important question when we advocate for something using digital tools, which is so transformative. And I agree with Akil about the power of initiatives that are happening online. We should indeed consider that not everyone is online, and especially when we go towards the regions, areas, and communities that have lack of social and economic development, the digital divide becomes bigger. So I think we should try to not just only work on mobilizing people online, but try to have a hybrid solution where we actually go out to communities and try to explain. And this also links to the topic that was mentioned by my fellow panelists about the trust towards the vaccine, because maybe we do make the vaccine a global common good, and I hope we do make it happen. Will everyone take it? That's another question. So, we need to talk to people on the ground, and try to engage different multimedia and hybrid methods of communication in that. So this was a bit like a summary of everything, but yeah, I couldn't say my introduction without commenting on the really important topics that was raised by my fellow panelists. So I'm looking forward to further discussions, and I know that we have some questions coming from the audience, which is amazing.
Thank you so much, Nino. Absolutely brilliant way to put it, things into perspective. So thanks a lot for that. And I think you've raised also a lot of very important guiding questions. And the favorite question is how. And so to engage into the discussion, I would like to first take up the question we have from the audience, who's exactly asking in this way. So I quote, "We are given to understand the COVID-19 vaccine is a commodity over which only the government of countries have decision-making. Those of us who are not a part of the administrative body of the state, what can we, the youth, do to contribute to the cause?" And so we have gone into the direction of what are possibilities, what is the power of youth, what is the means that we have in hand. And before offering to any one of my fellow panelists who would like to take the question, I would like to also share my own thought on it, which is we the youth really have the power to, when we truly believe in a thing and it needs to happen because it is the right thing, we have the power and also the channels to really inspire thousands and 10,000s, 100,000s of people to also take it up and be committed to the cause and also carry it forward in their own local groups and communities. And so this is really my point of view on these questions, what we the youth can really do. But then exactly it's also the question, what can we do now to influence the administrative body? And anyone who want to comment on that?
So I'd probably go first, really just to tie into what the youth can do. And this is a question that we've also been asking ourselves, considering that we work with young people across 10 countries in Africa. One of the questions we've been asking ourselves around the COVID-19 vaccine is what the youth can do. And I have maybe 2 or 3 answers that we've already developed, that this is what the youth can actually do, that we're already beginning to do as concerns this, and perhaps this would help sort of answer the question as well. So one is the youth can be used, not can be used, the youths are in fact agents to fight misinformation on vaccine. When the youths are mobilized and engaged and empowered with the right education on COVID-19 vaccination, they become immediately agents of change for misinformation that is out there. The youth can be used as the tool to fight the misinformation that is spreading around online platforms, and they can be used to really counteract, that misinformation that is already happening. So when the youth are educated, when the youth are informed about this vaccination and all the questions surrounding that, then they are able to become local ambassadors against misinformation. 2 is that the youths, we have a lot of energy within us. We are very strong. We are strong even our immune system wise, and therefore we can use our energy to volunteer offline, go into the communities and really be part of these social workers, be part of the community health workers who are going in down in the communities and talking to the elderly, talking to those who can't access online platforms, talking to those who may be locked down in their houses. The youths can volunteer their time and energy to help the small community health workers that exist to be able to amplify the message and to be able to disseminate this information and the vaccination eventually faster in the community. And thirdly is that we are the creative minds of this world. We are the innovative ones, and therefore we, the young people, can come up with innovations that can help in the distribution of these vaccines when they arrive, and also that can help in creatively communicating the right information in terms of how the vaccines are sent. And innovation here is not just about tech. Innovation really is about what is the new way that we're able to communicate these messages. And for example, something that you're already working on is we are working on developing a board game that educates people on COVID-19, its facts, and its vaccination. Something like that, which is very low cost, can be distributed across to children, to the elderly. And this is one of the innovative ways that they could play. there is a big challenge with cold chain systems. When vaccines will eventually come, you know, in the health, when you look at the health system, cold chain is a very important part of storing the vaccinations. And so young people can come up with ways on how they can make, you know, this cold chain last, how they can make electricity to power the cold chains as people move into the last mile communities, how they can work with governments and local hospitals and facilities to be able to better the already existing systems in terms of communication, in terms of the actual innovation in product development and whatnot. So this I see as some of the 3 top things that the youth can actually do when it comes to, you know, COVID-19, and when it comes to really contributing, becoming valuable contributor in this fight against COVID-19 and in hastening the vaccination process. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan, for sharing this super cool insight on what the youth can do, especially on the side of fighting the spread of misinformation, and also contributing your energy, what we have, and creativity for immediate crisis response. Basically, I also see the stream of, so on the one side, how we're bridging the time until everybody gets vaccinated, fighting misinformation, building trust. On the other side, it's really how to put the pressure on our elected representatives who are in the power to make the decisions. And perhaps, Akil, you can share with us what you've experienced in this Twitter storm you've kind of opened up before, and what's the way how youth can organize to exert this kind of pressure on decision makers.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Stephen and what you just said. Just to repeat that one point, I think that Stephen mentioned is like the youth has a lot of energy and enthusiasm. I once had the honor to meet the former UN General Secretary, who told me it was Kofi Annan. I always refer to him as the one because he was the most charismatic one to me, and he referred to me like the more you act with enthusiasm, the bigger leader you become, and the more people will follow you. And I think that is exactly what the youth can do, like to show up with enthusiasm and energy, and to keep up this momentum. How to use that energy, I think why especially the youth is especially because we are the most globally connected or even locally connected ones with the tools that technology and social media have given us. So we can use tools as building communities, for example, in Facebook groups, to keep up the momentum and talk about this more, or spreading messages via WhatsApp and Signal, because they travel faster. If we go to areas where there's maybe no internet access, we can move to more low-tech solutions like text messages, but there's also different services that make it, for example, there's solutions in remote areas where you get free text messages and you can call a hotline that is free. So so you partner with somebody who basically gives you the information when you call them, and the call is free for you. So you can get access to information without paying for it, and that is really important when we go remote. To the last point, Lukas, that you mentioned, to keep up the pressure, I think it's really important to build those communities first, so that we can mobilize together, because that is our big power, especially if we talk about countries most countries in the African continent. The youth is the majority of the population. So what do you do if millions of people show up? Like you have to respond. And I think the most important part, what we've seeing and what we're starting to see more and more with technology, is that it helps us to be connected, to mobilize for a cause if we really want it, and if we're passionate enough to go for it. And that is what I would advocate for. Like, go to your local members of parliament, members of the city council, and literally demand it, and stay with this, what I mentioned before, momentum and consistency. What if you show up at this office every single week to demand what is the answer? When will the COVID vaccine arrive here? We've demanded this since 12 weeks now, where's the answer? At one point, he or she will feel pressured to go to maybe his superior if he doesn't have the negotiating power, to be like, hey, they're like standing here every single week. I need an answer. When is it coming? And you can do that with different entities. You have to see like who you can influence to, but I think the more connected you are to those and the more they are dependent on you, because you're the future voters. You are, I mean, in the end, the people have the power in democracies. And fortunately, most of the countries are democracies now. When we demand that, they have to respond, but we have to keep the pressure up high. And I think we can use that with Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, like using social media and technology to mobilize to keep that pressure up.
Absolutely. Thank you, Akil, for sharing these insights. And also, peculiar, you're bringing up the great Kofi Annan as one of the greatest leaders our planet has seen in modern times. I've also had a couple of weeks ago the chance to speak to his former Undersecretary General, Mr. Michael Möller, who was 40 years in the United Nations, 12 years as #2 man under Kofi Annan, under Ban Ki-moon, and under Guterres. So really one of the most experienced diplomats in this world today. And we were discussing about this appeal to declare COVID vaccines a common good. And what he told me is that the only real instrument that the world has to make such a bold thing happen, it would be to go through the Security Council of the United Nations, because that is the one body who can actually make a resolution that is legally binding for its member states. And the Security Council has the primary responsibility under the United Nations Charter for the maintenance of international peace and security, which is, in this situation, I think you can't even argue. This is now where the Security Council is called. And so I love the perspective on putting pressure on your local representatives to have a real face-to-face, go in front of their office, say, hey, here we are. Why are you not caring? Why are you not responding? But also to make a call really on our governments, really, and to push from our side, hey, we have the United Nations Security Council. This is now your responsibility to push into it. And I think that's also a huge power where we young people can make a push. And now also with the United States of America having a new president, there's also now a much higher functionality, as one would hope, in the Security Council due to this whole veto right structure. Nino, you're raising your hand.
I wanted to comment on what you said regarding UN, and I think another good resource of our allies could be the UN's youth representatives that are representing their country's youth at the United Nations, because I mean it's their mandate to speak on behalf of the young people in their countries. So they're powerful, influential young people who have been chosen to be representatives. So if we could speak to them and we could get them as our allies, I think that could also help us to talk on the broader level. And then of course what Akil mentioned, I absolutely echo of local activism and making people uncomfortable. But yeah, unfortunately, you know, sometimes you do want to protest something, but you just have so much on your plate, you just don't have time to protest. So I think that's why we need to have different models of different types of people who can actually speak. You know, for some people it's their mandate to work on this. For some we just want to you know, bet on their enthusiasm to protest and bet on their enthusiasm to make governments uncomfortable. So and I think you know, it's also how we frame it, especially also together with the governments, because now it is true that the private sector or young people cannot really do much in terms of vaccines. It's not something that's, you know, that we could do. So, you know, maybe we need to also talk to the government and say, how can we actually help? You know, I'm sure there are some things that they need, like some resources, like even the awareness campaigns to get trust for the vaccine. So I think we should also, on the one hand, you know, demand the government to take responsibilities, but then also understanding the governments, especially in the countries where it's less developed, they're also struggling. So it's not that they don't want, it's just they cannot do it because the power dynamics are different. So I think as the young people, we should also be collaborative and say, okay, governments, how can we help? Because we have this resource of a globalized internet, and we have this resource of connections and networks. So how can we actually help you as a policymaker to get your voice heard? Because I trust that not, you know, like there are some naive people and good people in the governments, regardless of the policies that, you know, overall policies and institutions that we look at, that really want to make this a global common good, but they just can't have the access to the right people. So maybe we kind of help government at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely, Nino. The way of reaching out a hand and to take it versus to hold up the fist, I think it's a much more, you know, peace is the way. And I think also in our collective effort that we are seeking, we need to do it in the peaceful way and in the collaborative way. So thanks a lot. Just got a heads up from the organizers. We have only 8 minutes left. But yeah, thanks a lot, of course, so far on the beautiful discussions we've had. And so let's now kind of see how we can follow up on this momentum we now have. Akil, you were talking about how the first focus, how the primary focus should be on building the communities to then further on you know, keep the discussion going, keep it engaging, and keep the momentum on consistency. And I believe that with this platform we are speaking on today at the Social Business Youth Summit, we have a super foundation to begin with. So I would ask the organizers to, after the event, invite all the participants and all the young people who are with us today, to invite them to join this movement and to yeah, be a part of the process of creating campaigns. And let's make it, let's shape it. Akil likes that. And yeah, also Ahmad, can you turn on your camera so you can we can take a screenshot of the whole round? That would be really cool. Super, here we go, and cheese. Cool, fantastic, yeah. And so also that we have one more question from the audience that we haven't answered yet. So Sammy is asking, what exactly will happen if COVID-19 vaccine does become a global good? Would people from slums and underserved have free access? Swarnima, you're raising your hands.
Yeah, thank you for that, Lucas. I think this is a very important question, you know, that when we're talking about, you know, global good and, you know, what exactly are we trying to accomplish here? I think, you know, there are two parts to it. One is, of course, that if it does happen, and I hope it does, that, you know, we are sort of, you know, being able to reach everyone, then it's good in and of itself that, you know, we are talking about democratized access and everything. But I think more importantly, what we really need to think about is how to create templates of response even in the future. I mean, not to be a buzzkill or anything, but I think we know that this is only the first of many such crises to come. You know, in the age that we're living in, I mean, scientists are already talking about more pandemics and more such crises that are already hitting various parts of the world. And when we are perfecting a response, which is reaching all kind of marginalizations, we are creating a template for response in the future. And I think that is something that we really have to be invested in, that this is not, we cannot do a patchwork job right now, but also, you know, create systems, create processes, infrastructure, public health infrastructure, public health messaging, so that we can be prepared in the future. And the third part to this is the role of the youth that we've been talking about lies not just in mobilization, it also lies in adding nuance to conversation. Even though youth are being more and more empowered today, most positions of power are still being held by, senior people and, well, males, and what we need to do is, use this conversation, use this really, really, unprecedented experience, a global experience, to talk about mental health, talk about gender discrimination, talk about the, exclusion of transgender people and other such, minorities, so that, I mean, we mobilize not just for now, but also for the future, and very near future, I might add. So I think that is also the role of the youth over here to, for a universal sort of, mobilization, and add that intergenerational lens to it as we go.
Absolutely. Thank you, Swarnima. And yeah, I think we've talked about this also before this week on the phone, how this this global pandemic now is really this crisis where we have to acknowledge the interrelatedness and interconnectedness that all human beings on the planet Earth are sharing. And so picking up on your point that while this is now our most active crisis and is dominating all news, we are certainly aware that the next crisis might just be on the way. We've talked about the Greta Thunberg and the climate crisis we are all worried about. And so our friends in Bangladesh, they always tell us the flood is over, get ready for the next flood. And so I think in this way, it's really mostly important that emerging from this crisis, to have a clear understanding that there is no going back to a way of seeing isolated, seeing countries as isolated entities, to see ourselves as an isolated individual, but we have to understand the interconnectedness and really live by it. And so as a closing statement, I would ask all of you for very briefly, 30 seconds, what is the one thing that you are committing for after we get through this crisis, what there's no going back? So who wants to start it?
I'll make it very fast. I'll commit to further building communities and breaking borders even in our heads.
Super cool.
I'll go next. We as Storylink, we are committing to improving on literacy on COVID-19 vaccines and how they affect communities. Yeah.
Thank you. Who wants to go next?
I think it's me. Yeah, I think I will certainly commit to take as much opportunity as I could, and as an NGO also from this situation we're having, to provide and sustain more healthcare for young refugees. I mean, for now, I think we're talking about the vaccine, but I really think that the mental health care topic is something we need to commit to.
Thank you. Absolutely agree.
Okay. I will contribute by inform people and erasing misinterpretation, misinformations, and be a good role model, I think. Yes.
Yeah, highly important point. My mentor, Hans Reitz, who is speaking later on the closing remarks, he gave me this one sentence that really stick to me, who goes, "We are always an example, and let's try most of the time to also be a role model." So Marvin really echoes with me.
Yeah, okay. I think I'll go next. I'll keep it very short. I think I'll pledge to continue to have intergenerational conversations, because the world is not just young people. We have a lot of people in our social structures who differ with the views of the youth. So no matter how difficult it is, I would pledge to continue to have intergenerational conversations. And also, highlighting how we can use tech for good. So there is Facebook, let's look for good pages, good communities, not like stalking and gossiping, but the good stuff, what we can learn from it. So these are the two pledges.
Thank you.
I think I'm the one left. I commit to all the things that was said, but I think all those are really good commitments. I think, yeah, precisely here, I think I would also commit to talking more about the vaccine and how it should be a common good, but also I think what I would commit, because I'm in the sphere of human capital development and economic development, I think I would commit to looking beyond of when we get the vaccines, how can all those who had to fall back within their economic systems and welfare, how can we regenerate those? Because there is no going back, but we are also quite low, and we need to elevate the communities, and we need to elevate people. So I commit to thinking more inclusively about that.
Thank you for this wonderful closing statement. Thank you all for taking the time on this Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, depending where you are. Thanks a lot to the organizers who are making this platform happen and who've been inspiring us with amazing content over these last days. And everybody, I wish you enjoy the rest of the conference. We now go back to the main room, and hope to see you there. Everybody, keep it YY, and see you soon. Bye-bye.